The corporate elite is getting nervous. Donald Trump is getting nervous. The Republican establishment is getting nervous. The Democratic establishment is getting nervous. And they're going a little bit nuts. How can we stop Bernie?
With just hours to go now until the Nevada caucuses, the contenders out there are spending their time campaigning across the state. All that is, except for Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders spent most of the day in California. That is where the most delegates are up for grabs on Super Tuesday on March 3rd. Here to talk about all of it, we welcome to the broadcast tonight Lily Adams. She is the former communications director for Kamala Harris's presidential campaign, former spokesperson for Hillary Clinton, now a fellow at Georgetown's McCourt School of Public Policy. And back with us again, Karine Jean-Pierre, chief public affairs officer for MoveOn and an alum of both the Obama campaign and the Obama White House. Both of you, thank you for joining us and welcome. Let me start with you, Lily, and I want to put a graphic up on the screen here. This is the financial picture of these campaigns on the eve of the Nevada caucuses and just a week or so ahead of Super Tuesday. You see there, Bloomberg, $55 million on hand, although really he has limitless money on hand. He can spend whatever he wants. So that ought to just go to eternity there. That symbol, that Bloomberg one. But you see the rest there, Steyer, Sanders, and then after Sanders, everybody else under $10 million there. Klobuchar, Warren, both $2-3 million. I was looking at some of the ad spending in those Super Tuesday states this week. I looked at Virginia, and I saw $4 million worth of ads from Bloomberg on the air and zero from all of the other Democratic candidates. I wonder, is there a story with major implications for Super Tuesday that's being undercovered here?
Well, I think absolutely. I mean, people say that we're going to get to a national primary on Super Tuesday, but nearly every single state has some form of early voting except for Virginia. And so nearly 40 to 50% of the ballots for Super Tuesday are going to be in by Super Tuesday. So not being on the air in these states and ceding the airwaves to Mayor Bloomberg and to Senator Sanders, who have, you know, substantial war chests. Obviously, one is self-made of his own money. But it's a huge disadvantage for campaigns like Senator Warren and Mayor Buttigieg and Vice President Biden to be completely absent.
Karine, we were trying to play a little bit of expectation setting there in that last segment at the board for Nevada tomorrow. I think it's safe to say the expectation, the favorite going into this would be Bernie saying, hey, Nevada is the legalized gambling capital of the world. We could say the morning line favorite in Nevada is probably going to be Bernie Sanders. I wonder, though, is there a difference for him when you start talking about trying to get this party to unite behind him? Is there a difference for him, a significant difference between winning this thing big tomorrow in Nevada, double digits, 15 points, something like that, versus another one of those New Hampshire-like victories where it's 2-3 points, he's under 30, that talk of the ceiling is still there?
Yeah. So it's really interesting because, right, Nevada is the first state that is diverse. We had the first two states that Iowa being 90% white, New Hampshire being 93% white. Here we have a totally different kind of electorate for Democrats, and a lot of young Latino voters are excited about Bernie Sanders, which is incredibly important for him in the turnout for Nevada. Look, and we've had, as you laid out, we've had a high turnout in early voting. 75,000 people have voted already. And caucus state actually worked really well for Bernie. We saw that in 2016 because he has these really loyal, extremely loyal base, and they come out with these caucus type of caucus contests. So I think one of the reasons he's not in Nevada right now is because they probably feel very confident with the early voting, with the numbers that we have been seeing where he's at double digits in that state going into tomorrow, and because it's a more diverse contest, I think he can do much better than he has in the last two contests.
Lily, you heard that clip there coming into this segment. Bernie Sanders telling that crowd today that the Democratic establishment is scared of him and scared of his success. Is that true? And if it is the Democratic establishment in position to keep him from getting this nomination?
Well, look, I don't think there is some sort of secret Democratic establishment meetings going on in some back room somewhere where we decide as a Democratic establishment whether we are afraid or not afraid of Bernie Sanders. I think if he, what he wants to do right now is go from being the front runner to being the prohibitive front runner for the Democratic nomination. And that starts in Nevada. And I agree that if he posts a big win there, that will have huge implications for the rest of the cycle. And I think it will put him in a really good position to close the gap in South Carolina and then going into Super Tuesday. And I think if those things happen, and this is using a lot of ifs, then I do think Democrats will rally around him if he is going to be the prohibitive, front runner for the nomination. Because the most important thing to Democrats, more important than any candidate that they love, more important than any candidate they don't really like, is beating Donald Trump in November. And I do think Democrats will rally around that.
Karine, this suggestion has been talked about quite a bit this week that there's sort of a pileup behind Sanders in this race. Then you've got Bloomberg, but then you've got Biden, and they're kind of chasing the same voters. And, oh, by the way, so is Buttigieg, and so is Klobuchar. And there's a lot of overlap there, and there's not a clear path at this moment for any one of them to get a clear and direct shot at Bernie Sanders, and that because of that, Sanders might be able to skate by at 30, 35% in a bunch of different primaries and build an insurmountable delegate lead. Do you think that's a realistic prospect, that it could go that way? And do you see a way tomorrow for one of these candidates to get that clear shot at him?
I think it's going to be very difficult. Look, there is a battle for that moderate lane, and there are many moderates battling for that lane. And with the, with the weakness of Biden, unfortunately for his campaign, it hasn't helped, which is why Bloomberg is in the race. Look, Sanders has been able to consolidate that progressive lane. We will see how Warren's fiery performance the other night in a debate, which debates have mattered, as we saw in New Hampshire with Klobuchar. She got a rise and she was able to move up and did really well and raise some money off of her debate performance. We will see what happens with Warren tomorrow. Does that help her? Does that help her in South Carolina? I've been talking to folks on the ground where there's a buzz about her because of her performance in the debate recently, and clearly in Nevada. And so now people are watching. They're watching, okay, where are they going to place? Where's Biden going to place? Where's Warren going to place? And that's going to really play into South Carolina and moving forward into the Super Tuesday states.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.